aside from us. So
welcome to the Inspired Evolution, and it is a brotherly treat to be here today. We have with us Mickey Space. Mickey, how are you?
I'm very good, thanks, Amrit. Thanks for asking. It's a real pleasure to be here talking with you today. I've been an avid follower of your Inspired Evolution, and I was wondering when you might ask me to come and share a story. So I'm really delighted and grateful to be here with you, brother.
Oh, it's a total treat to have you here, bro. And it's a bit surreal, I have to admit, because it's like we have deep and meaningful chats all the time. So actually having you on like a formal sort of, I don't know how formal this is going to turn out at the end of the day. But those tuning in for Mickey for the first time, you're in for an absolute treat. There is so much that goes into the back end of all the output that comes from this amazing man. I was thinking about, like, in your intro, I was like, oh, well, he's effectively a Maharishi, right? Because he's like teaching people how to become yogis. But Mickey is a yoga teacher that basically teaches people how to become yoga teachers. It's been an avid part of his practice for, God knows, we're about to find out how long. And then also the amazing other component to your life, another massive offering that you have in your life, is the sound element to everything that you do, which is DJ Mickey Space, which people know you very, very well for. I remember the first time we sort of crossed paths, you weren't even aware that we had crossed your path, but it was a New Year's Eve event at Tribe so many years ago, these awesome events that we had in Melbourne. And Mickey was DJing, and I remember we were all just tired. It was one of these really long days. And Mickey came on to sort of ring in the new year. And everybody was up, everybody was dancing, didn't matter where you were from, music from all different genres, all different walks of life. And it was just one of the best sets I've ever witnessed. So from that point, DJ Mickey Space was somewhere in the back of my head. And then we met at a meditation retreat. And I was just like, we bonded over a song, which was Gaudi. Do you remember which song? Spiritual Orphans. Right, yeah. That's right, Gaudi, Spiritual Orphans. And I was just like, have you heard this? And you're like, dude, I've created a whole mix around this track. And I was like, dude, we're gonna get along. And the rest is kind of history. We've just been like the closest of friends between yourself, even your partner Cardia, and my wife Kay as well. So it's been an absolute treat. So yeah, brother, thank you so much for being here, doing this for us. You are a wealth of wisdom when it comes to both music and yoga, so it's an absolute treat to have you here. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Thanks, Brother Bear. And a wealth of wisdom, it's all relative. I mean, it's a constantly evolving part of the process is to gain that wisdom. But I think also very much part of this spiritual path is to actually shed some of the knowledge and wisdom that sometimes keeps us very much contracted in the physical and material domain.
How there's a lot in there. How's the I guess if I rewind back a little bit, like, where did yoga come to you? And why did it call, like, what was it about yoga that called you so deeply? Like, I really wanted to learn a little bit about, where Mickey was at when, because now when people tune into you, you're like full yogini mode. And I just kind of want to understand, like, what was going on in your life? What brought you to yoga? Was it something that was always present for you? Because when you meet Mickey, like, everybody falls in love with him immediately. The energy that he carries, the loveliness, the kindness, the open-heartedness, the grace is just, ever present. But it's knowing you. It's also like a practice. It's a cultivated sense, your yoga. Where did that come from, bro?
Oh, good question. And long answer or short answer?
Long answer. It's a podcast.
Look, and then how much can I divulge? I suppose. Look, I guess. I mean, yoga is really just ultimately it's the pathway back to spirit, back to discovering and understanding who we are at our deepest level. And I guess we start asking those questions from the moment we kind of gain our intellectual sort of identity. And so, I mean, we could potentially take it back to childhood, but I would say, I mean, as far as understanding, guess getting an insight into what yoga is and was, it happened to me around about my university years, so in my early, sort of late teens, early 20s, when I guess that those times, and I'm talking, you know, I'm now 51 years old, so I'm talking the end of the 80s. I go back a little while, a bit longer than you, brother. But back at around those times, end of the 80s and beginning of the 90s, it was, I mean, where I was at the time growing up in Melbourne. My childhood was backwards and forwards between Italy and Melbourne, so I had a fairly unique and varied upbringing. But at that particular point in time, as you're sort of exploring your identity in the world, and there was a lot of, I guess, subcultures happening and flourishing. There was the whole punk revolution, which I was a part of. You know, the punk and the grunge. You know, I managed to see Nirvana live when they came out, which was a real blessing. And that was that kind of, you know, that point in time of that real rebellion, I guess against some of the you know,
the mainstream
negative aspects
infrastructure
of mainstream society.
Yeah.
But then I guess there was also, and then it also emerged that whole house and techno revolution, which also happened around about then. I was blessed to experience that when I went to England on a holiday, and landed in the first ever, one of the first raves at the Summer of Love back in, and so, you know, that kind of blew my mind, you know, that whole experience in more ways than one. And then I got exposed, I guess, to through philosophy, looking at ways of thinking of the whole kind of beatnik generation. And I mean, we were past that was more the 60s, 70s, but the whole psychedelic revolution of that time, the Timothy Learys and the Aldous Huxleys, and all of those very thought-provoking entrepreneurs, and the music that went with it as well, of course, the Doors and the Grateful Dead. I even managed to catch Grateful Dead on a trip to the US in around about 92. Would have been one of their last tours.
Yeah.
So, you know, I guess I had a taste of that whole 60s hippie revolution, psychedelic culture, and I guess I saw that a lot of the influence, and the Beatles, of course, too, they were a big part
huge,
of my inspiration at the time. And I noticed that a lot of the influence was coming from their journeys to India and their quest, I guess, for knowledge and understanding ourselves from a spiritual perspective. Which I guess that's what happened back in those days, is this renaissance of you know, this whole idea of the psychedelic psychedelic culture was somewhat based on psychedelics. So, you know, back then it was LSD and I think is the main one, and you could say mushrooms. But what these psychedelics did is they opened people's minds to different realities, but maybe to a deeper reality within themselves, and so it inspired them to seek answers to questions that maybe were always there, questions of, you know, who am I, where do I come from? But I guess through the psychedelic experience, having a bit of a taste of that answer, and so a lot of them were drawn back to India and the essence of yoga, because really yoga even though here in the West we mostly have sort of we've absorbed the physical practice, the asana, and seeing
It's a good stretch.
usual benefits of having a good stretch.
Yeah.
But at a deeper level, it's really the inquiry into the nature of our true being, of our true self. And so I was scratching my head going, well, these guys who, I was inspired by, the Timothy Learys, the Aldous Huxleys, the Beatles and the Grateful Dead. Where did the inspiration come from?
Where's that wellspring? Yeah, right.
From the East, Ram Dass, all the likely suspects of that age. So I started inquiring into, I guess, it's interesting because a lot of people come to yoga through the physical because that's how it's mostly presented these days. And then they discover the spiritual aspect of it. Whereas for me, it was kind of like a flip side. It was the other way around in some way. I was really quite curious about the spiritual aspect. So at uni, we had all these clubs, and there was a particular club called the Ananda Marga, which was one of the Indian spiritual traditions of yoga. And so I went along, sat on a few meditation classes, and there was these concepts going around of reincarnation, of vegetarianism, and foreign concepts to me growing up as a young Catholic boy. But having a ponder on that really really inspired me to dig a little deeper. And so I guess that's where my journey started. And then some friends said, hey, there's a yoga intensive happening down the corner at this little studio. Let's join up. And so I did. And so then I was exposed to the asana practice as well. And it was a delight because I guess growing up as a kid in Italy, as a sort of young teenager, I've traversed all these various subcultures in my times. At the age of around 13, 14, so we're talking now 83, 84, I was exposed to the hip hop culture, and this is kind of the original hip hop culture.
Yeah.
Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, and
Run
the Sugar Hill
DMC,
Gang, and that whole kind of vibe. And I was really very artistic at that time on a sort of visual art basis, so the whole visual art phenomena of the graffiti art really drew me in. And breakdance. Maybe not that many people know that little secret about me, but I was an avid breakdancer. So I kind of the breakdance sort of went by the wayside probably around about the age of 15, 16, when most of us start to discover our attraction to women and or whichever sex you're attracted to, and the whole party idea of going out and drinking alcohol and whatever else comes across your field, and so I kind of let. I was really, I guess, very expressive and physical in my nature in my early teens, and sort of let that go a little bit in my later teens. And so then when the yoga came into my
back
sphere,
around,
it was like, yes, I'd been missing this. There was a lot of mental stimulation, I guess, through my uni years, and spiritual seeking, I guess, but the physical had gone maybe a little by the wayside. So suddenly having that practice again was like, oh wow, yes, my body, and had really been missing this. So that really resonated, and so I went and then started exploring Iyengar yoga, and shortly after that time, it was 96 to be precise. I was actually at that time. 94, 95, 90, 96, I was working in the field of animation. I'd studied visual communication at university, so that was sort of focused on graphic design and art direction. But I was always really inspired by drawing itself. I was a real avid drawer and painter. And so I ended up finding a job in animation. And so back then it was, this is kind of pre laptops,
Pre-PC, yeah.
pre PCs, pre all of that, pre phones. So it was traditional hand drawn animation, and yeah, I did a little run at this studio for nearly 2 years, I think, on a series, on a kids animation series. But towards at the end of that particular series, they said that we all had to go and take some time off before the next series would come in, and I was really getting to my yoga that time, and so I was having this real draw towards India and
Going for a trip.
seeing that was that was the spiritual home of yoga, and so I had this real calling to go to India. So when we were told, okay, time to take a break, and I'd saved a bit of money in the meantime, so I'm like, yep, I'm off to India. That's it. And I kind of said, how can if I went for a little longer than 2 months, will you let me back in? So I go for 6 months, and they said, yeah, no worries, Mickey, just go and have some fun, enjoy enjoy your journey to India. So so off I went, with this whole idea, go to India and really get to the roots of yoga, and but I decided to stop off in Thailand on the way with the intention. I was at the same time still embracing the whole kind of house music, dance music, and culture. And I'd heard about the full moon party, so I thought, I want to go and check out this full moon party. And I also just need to chill out. I've been working hard for a couple of years here. I need to chill out on a nice beach in a tropical island. I hear they're pretty nice in Thailand. So literally, that's another long story. I won't go into too much detail, but I landed on this tropical island, and a year and a half later, I was still there. One thing led to another, and but after a year and a half of being there and look, having a wild ride in.
But hang on a second, because that's actually where the name Mickey Space comes from, right? Like, you had a bar called Mickey's Space. Is that correct?
You're almost there, not quite.
Go on.
It is true, yeah. I ended up opening up a bar. So I ended up meeting a woman who I fell in love with, and we actually got married and had a child. And we built together. So she was Thai, she was from Bangkok, but we after the year and a half that I'd been there, and I scratched my head going, oh geez, I haven't made it to India yet, and the bar situation that we were working in at the time
got stuck at the Way House.
Definitely. I asked her if she wanted to come to India because I had this calling, and so we did. We went to India, 7 months in India, traveling around India and having an amazing journey. But when we came back, we decided to open a bar, and no, the bar was actually called Venus Bar. And but I was also dipping into this idea of being a DJ at the time. You had your own bar, someone had to play the music, so I thought, why not be me? And so it was also, if you think about we're talking about here 97 or 98, it was also about the time of the advent of emails. And so I had to create my email name, and I'm thinking, oh, what's a clever name, Mickey's to call Mickey's Space on the internet. Mickey's Space. So it was my space on the internet, and that's how it came to be.
Right.
My original email name. So and then of course, needing a DJ name, I thought, oh well, Mickey Space.
Yeah.
So that's how it came to be, and it's interesting because my real name is actually my Italian name, because my Italian heritage is from my father's side is Michele Antonio Maselli. So that's my real name, and when we came back to Australia, I lived in Thailand in the end for 7 or 8 years. running paths, running parties, but
Mm.
having also had that taste of India, and I went back there another time during that period as well, uh, and so I still I already had this immersion into the spiritual journey, into the spiritual path.
Mm.
So some people say, well, yeah, I was very much having one foot in both worlds, in the party world, I guess, and in the spiritual yoga world.
Mm-hmm.
But really, ultimately, life is just one journey, and
Mm.
the experiences, we need to embrace them all. But definitely after some time of navigating those two worlds, we came back to Australia. So it was 2004, I think, when we came back to Australia. Partly because wanted to let my daughter go to a decent school, have a decent education, I guess. Partly also because the party lifestyle was getting a little tiring,
Mm.
and also getting a little interesting, in the sense that we'd got pretty um, we were doing rather large parties by that stage, and
Mm.
so we were having to deal with not just the local police, but also the local mafia, and there came a point when guns came out in the bar, and I just reassessed the situation, going, I came to this island because it was paradise, and I've
Yeah.
been living the dream, really. I
Yeah.
did for so many years of just living, this beautiful life on this paradisical island. But when suddenly that gets challenged with your actual,
Mm.
potentially your life, um, there was a reassessment.
Reevaluation of all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so came back to Australia, and even though came back, I guess they didn't keep my job for me after 8 years.
I was just gonna ask. I was just gonna ask. I was like, did you rock back up and go, hey guys, I'm back. 16 years later.
Well, I think the
I did
studio
too
had moved to
much.
Perth or something like that. But I sort of dibble dabbled a little bit with, thinking, well, what do I do now with myself? Back into a little bit of graphic design here and there. But obviously I was well versed in my DJing skills, so I dived back into my DJing, and started started gigging around Melbourne, and was kind of making a living as a DJ for a while. But even that was challenging, with a young family, with a young daughter going to school. Living that whole kind of nightlife world
Mm.
is a hard balance. Um, and look, I was really fully on the path, on the yoga path, and I just decided, no, this is my deeper calling. So I went and did my teacher training. So that was back in 2006. It was quite a in-depth course which I did at a place called Gita back then. It was
15 years ago.
around
Yeah.
about 900 hours course,
Mhm.
whereas these days most courses are a
200 hours. And you
200
can,
hour sort of dip.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, that was it. That defined my journey for since then, and since then I've been teaching pretty much full time yoga teacher, and then the last
Mm.
few years having the delight of being able to go into being a teacher trainer. Really, really enjoying that path now. It's been the last
Mm.
3-4 years
Mm.
teacher training. So yeah, what was the question again?
It was about how you came to yoga, and that was
I came to
perfect.
yoga. I think I gave you the long story.
I'm glad we got the long story. So in there, bro, there's so much to unpack, and obviously for those tuning in, you'll be tuning into the fact that like you've lived a creative lifestyle probably longer than you can care to remember. It's just what you've known, probably, whether it's been visual art, or whether it's been music, or whether it's been yoga. Like feeling into society and the way it's structured, bro. It's not often the most obviously rewarding path. I'll just call it that. Um, were you challenged by that at any point, and how did you navigate such challenges?
Yeah, look, I guess I haven't had a regular story. um,
Sorry.
yeah, unusual in many ways. It's funny, like the time that I spent in Thailand, particularly at the beginning, when we, I guess, the sort of peak of our good times when we had the bar and on the beach, and people would come and visit, and just and they'd be totally in awe, saying, "My gosh, you're living the absolute dream." I was living, having this beautiful little bar on the beach,
Mm.
and my life was literally going down to the beach each day and hanging out at sunset, and making some nice little cocktails for people, playing really nice music, and watching the sunset every day, and during the day going swimming, and um, yeah, hanging out in fisherman pants, and not
Mm.
being bothered by any of the troubles that most of our sort of friends in the Western world were being troubled by.
Consumed by,
Life
yeah.
was an absolute dream. Um, and a lot of people came and, gosh, this is what I dream, and this is my kind of retirement plan. And you'd see people actually coming a lot older than me at the time. I mean, I was in my sort of late 20s at the time. People a lot older than me coming, and with the hope of being able to do that, saving up their whole lives, working in a 9 to 5, and then opening up their little bar on the beach at the end of
Mm.
their life. For me, it was just something that I just stumbled upon. I had
Mm.
no plan to actually to do that on the out. As I told you, I went to Thailand with the intention of being there for 2 weeks. I had no plan to be there for any long period of time. I guess there was, in Taoism, there's this concept called Wu Wei, and
Mm.
it's the idea of being in the flow,
Mhm.
and I don't know how or why, but somehow I, without even knowing it, I had that natural inclination at a fairly young age to go with the flow,
Mm.
and just have a deeper trust.
Mhm.
So always, I guess, also sparked by the idea of adventure, and always um, really intrigued by the mystery and the unknown. And so, even though sometimes there's a fear of diving into the unknown, my sort of, I guess, motto in a way was just dive in,
Mm.
let go. This is one of my biggest lessons in our yoga journey, is to
Mm.
let go of all of our fears, of all of our contractions, and all of that keeps us locked up into
Mhm.
this kind of individual place of suffering ultimately.
Mm.
So yeah, I was blessed in a way, just without really even knowing intellectually that that's what I was doing. But I was just diving
Following the
in.
flow.
I wasn't. I saw friends back home. Oh, but we've got to, get the right job first, get the mortgage, get the house, get the career, get the marriage, do all the tick off all the boxes that
Mm.
we're conditioned to believe is the way to move in society.
Mm.
And maybe my little kind of, little foray into the punk world
Mm.
back in the late 80s gave me a little bit of impetus to rebel against those norms. So so yeah, so I never I sort of didn't really vibe with that conditioning, and so even coming back to Australia was challenging in many ways, because I came back with this kind of essentially a free spirited attitude that I had into, and it was easy to roll with that on a little island where even the people who came from a more contracted society,
Mm.
they came and they were on holiday. So, on holiday, people have that impetus to let go a little bit, to to let go of all those all those material contractions and ideologies. So yeah, coming back to a society which was really fully embedded into that matrix was a little bit challenging. It took me really, I guess, a few years to re-find, to land and find my way, and there was like, what do I do? That's why I said I kind of dabbled back into graphic design, and maybe I should get a career. Maybe I need a job, a proper 9 to 5, and that's what everyone else seems to be doing. I'll need to get that mortgage. I need to get the house. Those questions were certainly being asked, because that's what's drummed into you here. But I guess I already had that immersion into the spiritual journey through my yoga practice, that again, I guess I just trusted that was my path, and so so I dived into my teacher training and followed that as my journey instead.
So you've got music, which is something you absolutely adore and love, and you've got your body and your movement and the yoga, which you absolutely adore and love, and you've got your spiritual path and the path towards spiritual enlightenment, which is the great mystery which you're ever evolving towards. Do you now look back and how does it feel being mapped out on a path where you're doing what you love, and that sustains you, and that gives you, like, the more you give to your practice, to your music, the more it brings back into your life, like this reciprocity between the doing of your life and the being of your life being in such rewarding harmony and expression. How, like, it seems like I was going to ask if that was consciously constructed, but I feel like that's been a consequence of flow, based on what you've just said. So how does that feel at this juncture?
Yeah, I guess it feels pretty good. I mean, it's a never-ending journey. I still feel like I'm still hopefully only halfway there, or even less. But
Yeah.
um, so good question. But yeah, I guess when you trust in that flow, then it's going to unfold in that magical way. It doesn't come without its challenges. There are times, there have been times on the journey where I've sort of felt, oh geez, would be nice to have some superannuation stashed away, and and just all the various things that we're conditioned to believe is essential. But it seems the more that, even in those times, the more I just kind of let go of any attachment to
Expectation?
and expectations.
Sorry, I
Yeah,
didn't mean to program that in. I thought
yeah,
that's what the word was you're
yeah,
looking
definitely.
for.
That things just seem to flow in the right kind of way. I mean, I'm not materialistically a very wealthy person, but I'm wealthy enough to have everything I need, and so I guess it's also an assessment of what are your true values, what is important for you, and yeah.
And did yoga help you define some of that, in terms of, because I think so many of us tuning in are materialistically inclined? Was it a combination of the time spent on the beach and people waiting for their retirement to live the life that you were already living, in potentially in combination with the yogic path, that realizing that materialism isn't everything?
I would say so, absolutely. I mean, that's essentially what it is. It's the journey back to spirit. So the journey of understanding our true nature, So the greatest achievement, I guess, if you want to say so, is that self-realization is the enlightened state of being, and no material wealth can determine that. So that's my deepest calling, and my deepest journey is towards that. So as my journey evolves, or unfolds rather, let's say, towards that realization, I feel less inclined to grasp onto any kind of material inclinations, but also somehow it just seems that within that flow that I'm provided for. It's almost like when you trust, when you have that deep trust, there is a sense of Ma. And Ma, we could call Ma as the great mysterious energy, call her Mother Nature or whatnot, but she supports us and holds us up, and provides all that we need upon this journey. So yeah, it's an interesting one, because it we still are living in a material world, and there is this sort of balance between, and that is also the yogic path, this balance of effort and surrender. We still need to, even towards the journey of self-realization, there is, at least from the Hatha Yoga perspective, which is been one of my main sort of streams of yoga that I've been walking upon. There is a sense of effort required, but also with that balance of deep surrender.
And how do you reconcile that? Because they do seem to be a bit yin and yang, don't they? The essence of effort and yet surrender.
Yeah. Well, you could see it in a typical, let's say, even in a typical, if we go back to basics, in the typical asana class, typical physical yoga class, let's say a vinyasa class or a hatha yoga class, where there's this effort required in the postures that you're coming into, that you're moving into. And that effort then is also rewarding, because you feel the physical and vital benefits of the practice. But then there's a constant reminder to also, at the same time of making the effort of being in the pose, of actually surrendering into the pose. So in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali talks about, he doesn't really go into the asana all that much, hardly at all really. It's all really more about understanding the nature of the mind and moving beyond the mind. But as far as the asana goes, he talks about these two words, which are stira and sukham, which sort of mean firmness and lightness within a pose. And another way I like to describe it is that effort and that surrender. So you need to create a little bit of effort to be strong in the pose, but you also need to surrender to the pose itself. Otherwise, there's too much striving, and that's too much of the yang, which then when that overrides, then that can lead to to sympathetic kind of nervous system state of being, where it's everything's too intense, you're over intensified. So you need to really balance that out with a little bit of letting go as well. And so within each pose there is that duality happening, but then also the beautiful letting go of the shavasana at the end of a yoga class. That's you've done the hard work. You've put in the effort to achieve the asana as best your body can, and then you surrender, and then you lie down and you fully just let go and drop into that beautiful blissful state. And yeah, and that's really, I believe that's the way we should approach life, is with that real balance of effort and surrender, because ultimately we live in this dual world, and like you said, it's the yin and the yang of all of the polarities within this world that we live in. I mean, the deeper truth of yoga is to then transcend that into the non-dual,
Mm-hmm.
into the non-dual reality or truth, and that's the deeper path of self-inquiry, which I'm, I guess, a little even more drawn into these days with my study of Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, which is the non-dual path of yoga. So looking into that kind of transcendence of the duality of the manifest world, and understanding, I guess, the source or the essence of consciousness, and within that reality, there is no yin or yang.
Yeah,
It's
it's
all
interesting,
it's all
isn't it?
one.
Because there's the sorry, as you were talking about the yoga class and the effort and the surrender, and then realizing that it all sort of you showed up to your mat with like the amount of effort that you can put in, and then at the end you surrender and you lay down and you take it in and you let go in the shavasana. For some reason, I couldn't help but draw parallels to like a metaphor for life and death. Actually, it was really actually quite profound hearing you share that. Like you show up with the body that you're given, and you know, effort, surrender as much as you can, and in the end, come back to rest and yeah, very interesting, very intriguing. But yeah, I think that you've touched on something there which yeah is really interesting, isn't it? Because yoga, a lot of it, from my humble perspective, the asanas and stuff, they come from the Vedic philosophy, right? And the Vedic philosophy is very much this and that, this yin and yang, effort, surrender. But when we start moving in towards Vedanta, that is beyond the Veda, yeah. And beyond the Veda, it comes back to this unity, this oneness, this yeah, like unity consciousness. I guess it's beyond the duality once again. Um, has it? I guess it's really intriguing just to sort of feel into what, as a yoga practitioner, kind of what continue. Like, do you follow like a model in terms of, okay, like I've been invested in Vedantic philosophy for this amount of time, now it's time to move on to the beyond, or it's just a natural calling that calls upon you at certain stages and you just evolve and unfold into the stages that speak to you specifically?
Yeah, look, I would say that it is more of a natural calling. Yes, yes.
Does it mystify you that there's been like it's almost like a science in so many ways, and it's so ancient in so many ways? Do you trip out on that, bro? Like, do you ever sit there and just go, like, what did they used to know then that we don't know now? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, what? Do you think about that sometimes?
Absolutely, and I think and that's been one of my sort of, passions of researching a little bit lately is looking back at something that came to me upon my journey was a book called The Holy Science by Swami Sri Yukteswar, and he was the teacher of Yogananda, which maybe a lot more people are familiar with, who wrote the Autobiography of a Yogi.
Yeah.
And he talks about the yugas and the ages of
That we
time,
live in. Yeah.
and I guess we're conditioned with our sort of infant idea of scientific knowledge, and science is incredible the way it's evolved in the last few hundred years to have all the incredible knowledge and medicine and all the rest that we have today. But I think poor old Darwin might have just had it slightly, might have had it slightly wrong. This idea of this linear evolution.
Mm.
And look, there's no absolutes, and I'm not saying I know for sure either way. But Yukteswar proposed this idea of cycles of evolution. And when you just look out in nature, it makes complete sense. In nature, everything is cyclical. You know, if you look at the seasons, they evolve cyclically, and things in nature, they are born, they evolve, they flourish, and then they wither away and they die. And that's really the
natural order of things, isn't it? Yeah,
it's the natural order of things. It's not linear. It's cyclical.
Yeah.
And so Yukteswar proposed this idea of these yugas. He calls them the yugas, the cycles of time. And these cycles are really the cycles of consciousness. And so he talks about these cycles of being cycles of 24,000 years for a full cycle. So that, meaning there's a 12,000 year cycle of evolution of consciousness, and then there's a 12,000 year
de-evolution
consciousness. Which you think, how is that possible? Haven't we always just been evolving? But now our records of the past are pretty limited. There's not much that we know that man's been around for a hell of a long time, and we're starting to get more, scientific evidence that we weren't just apes roaming around 10,000 years ago, that we've probably been around for, potentially, if not thousands of years, millions of years, potentially. So what, do we just roam around as an ape for millions of years? It doesn't seem to be the case, and actually recent scientific discoveries are showing. So there's that famous temple called Göbekli, I think, temple.
Yeah, Göbekli Tepe.
In Turkey, I think it was discovered, and that's dated to 9,500 years BC, before Christ. And an extremely intelligent, sophisticated temple of ceremony. So a ceremonial temple. So, but super sophistication. So, back, more, we're talking, what's that, 12,000 years ago.
Yeah.
There was a much more advanced civilization happening than we originally thought. And look, I studied art history at in high school, and particularly I was growing up in Italy at the time, and so I studied Renaissance art. So we looked at Renaissance art history, and it was a real blessing to study that, and being in Rome and going up to Florence for a sort of school camp to see all these beautiful artworks in real life. But the whole concept of Renaissance art was the Rinascimento was this revival of the more kind of higher, more evolved times of art back in the Roman times, which was back then only maybe 1,000 years prior, or whatever, 1,000 or 2,000 years before, a couple of thousand years before. But even then, you scratch your head going, well, how come back in Roman times their art was more refined than this idea of the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, when art became very kind of 2D, very unrefined. And then there was this kind of revival around that Renaissance time. So back then it was always a bit of a mystery. It kind of didn't make sense as far as on that evolutionary scale of things. But now when you look at this model of Yukteswar, the idea is that we devolved, and we were devolving in consciousness for all those thousands of years, from that the height of the call it the golden age of the man at its highest peak of consciousness was around about 11,500 BC. And then the height of the devolution was funnily enough, in the middle of the Dark Ages, around about 500 AD. And if you think about, looking back at what was going on around the 500 AD sort of time, we were just roaming around, raping, pillaging, and killing each other, and just purely in
Barbaric.
survival mode.
Yeah.
Barbaric survival mode. And so this is said to be Kali Yuga, and Kali Yuga is the yuga, or the time frame, which is more focused on the material aspect. And so we, in this model, and look, there are various models and ways of looking at this, but in this model of Yuktaswar, that Kali Yuga time frame was from about 700 BC, and we came out of it in theory in around about 1700 BC, and then you've always got a couple of hundred years transitional period here and there. So we've only just kind of entered the new Yuga, which is called Dwapara Yuga, which is essentially the age of energy, the energy age. And it's interesting that literally on that time that started around the year 1900, I think it was in 1905, that Einstein came up with his
E equals MC squared.
MC squared. So, you scratch your head thinking, that's a strange coincidence, isn't it?
Yeah, a little quinky
so it's
there.
kind of this transition between, materialist mentality to, a slightly more energetic mentality. So it's kind of good news that in theory we're on the onwards and upwards trajectory.
Yep, we're on an inspired evolution.
I guess the bad news is it's going to be quite a few thousand years before we come back to the next golden age. Such a huge, but maybe in a few lifetimes we'll get there.
Fascinating. And so, man, thank you so much for sharing that. And I love, just the idea of the yugs, and then where we're at in it and how we're evolving, and just that awareness of, just the wisdom and potentially why we're less illuminated, let's call it that, now than potentially at other stages or other ages, it even seems. And it's such food for fodder for the mental sort of curiosities.
There's also, I mean, some people say, but there's no records of having an advanced technological age back then. How can we possibly contemplate that we were more evolved back then? The records we have is that man lived a pretty simplistic life in nature, and things were a lot simpler back then. So how could we be more evolved? But I guess it's all about evolution of consciousness, and while we in this, coming out of this material age, we sort of associate material things to be
as being success and evolution,
as being successful. Back then, potentially man was telepathic in his communication ways, so there was no need for a good mobile phone or internet or the rest, because it was all telepathic communication, and if you're living in a golden age where you're living in an enlightened state, then what's the point of having the big house and the big car? You think about, even we kind of know this subconsciously. Think about when we go on a holiday. We go on a holiday, and what do we want to do? We want to get away from the busyness. We want to get away from the craziness. We want to leave the mobiles at home. We want to be in nature. There's no reason why you can't be in that state here and now, and that's, I guess, the beauty of this journey of the spiritual path is it is the journey back towards spirit, and to understanding our true nature, and to understanding the essence of who we are, so that we can, even though maybe on a mass scale of consciousness it's going to take a few thousand years for everyone to be in that enlightened state, there's no reason why you and I can't be in that state right here, right now.
How important is the essence of presence in and around all of that? Because I know a lot of yoga is about unity, Well, if you had to translate it into a word, it'd be unity, right? Am I right or am I wrong?
Yeah, you could say that,
Yep.
definitely.
And so in there, then you've got this essence of unity, and when I picture it, it's like unified heart, body, mind, spirit. But in order for all the things to kind of line up, I imagine presence would be kind of a key aspect. And then, because the question I really wanted to ask you was, in this exploration of consciousness, what has come to you? But then also, just before we get into that, it's like, how important is presence on that path of exploring your consciousness?
Well, I think it's everything, and in many ways, that's kind of the new catchword of modern day spiritual sort of seekers, and it's it's a beautiful and easy, well, easy and not easy, depends.
Simple but not easy. Yeah. I'm learning the difference between those
Simple
two
in
things.
theory.
Yeah, these are things I've been learning recently, the little subtleties.
Yeah.
Simple, not necessarily easy. Simple. I'm like, what? There's a massive, sorry, I digress.
But yeah, totally. I mean, presence is everything, and presence is really the nature of pure awareness, and I guess the idea is that we are working towards. So if you go back to the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali, who wrote the Yoga Sutras, and that's a wonderful text which kind of gives you the formula of achieving this ultimate presence. But in the second sutra, the second verse is Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which essentially means yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. One of the ways we can translate this. And so it's, first of all, it's acknowledging the mind. And so we often we have this this battle in some ways with the mind. And the important thing, first of all, is to understand the nature of the mind and how the mind works, because the mind is our greatest tool and ally to be able to reach the enlightened state, but then B, obviously to be able to operate in the world that we live in the manifest world. It's kind of like the portal in many ways. And so the challenge, I guess, is well, it's various aspects of the mind, but a big one is the egoic aspect, and what the ego does, as far as one of its main purposes, is to give us our individual, create our individual framework, and that's important to be able to operate in the world. But it's kind of like our biggest blessing and our biggest curse all at once. So it's constantly working between this idea of through memory and experience what's happened in the past, of working with that and then projecting
to inform your individuation. Yeah.
And projecting into a possible future. And so there's this constant sort of tug of past and future happening within our minds, through processing and the experience that we might have just had, or through memory, through recollection, and then through our intellect, but also projecting into the future of possibilities. That because that tends to be our main reality, we tend to give it so much power that we don't allow to be in the state of presence, which is the I guess the essence of consciousness. Consciousness is presence. So if we can see that like to see that sometimes as the inner light of awareness that shines through the lens of the mind, both to radiate out that inner light, that inner presence, but also then to be present in the experiencing of our manifest reality. So through the mind, and then the mind connected to the senses to experience. But you think about all the experiences that you have, you're rarely present in the experience. There is a seeing, a beautiful bird, and in a moment of seeing the beautiful bird, in that moment we are present. Yeah, in that moment we're present.
Mm-hmm.
That moment is generally a pretty small moment, and then the ego mind, quickly comes in to quantify or to justify or to qualify the experience. Ooh, interesting bird. I wonder if that's the same one as I saw last week, or it had some cool colours on it, didn't it?
Yeah.
Immediately takes you away from the presence of which, in that case the presence is within presence. The subject object dissolves. The mind, in that sense, regains the individuality. So it creates that duality again between the subject and the object.
That dissolution of the subject object is really the is where awe works so well, doesn't it? It's really where being in awe works so well, because that's where the subject gives himself over to the object in many ways, right?
That's right, and we have this all the time. We have these present moments, or I like to call them wow moments, because they're, let's say, they're fewer and in between than not. And but they are there in everyone's waking reality, and even in our dream states as well.
Yeah, even as you're sharing it, I'm like realizing, because we recently bought a new home and there's all this bird life there. And one of the things I'll see this bird and I'm like, wow, I've never seen that one before, or that's really interesting. I've always wanted to know what that one is. And in the moment, like I'm just watching, and then there's a moment where it's like, before it flies away, figure out which one it is, and I pull out my app, because there's this app that you can take a photo of the bird and you can figure out what it is. And in that moment, like all the sparks go on, but I'm like, okay, good to know this out. So as you're sharing, I'm sort of understanding, like, where the subject and the object relationship is, and the key to presence. And it's interesting how you mentioned the second sutra, because it is that fluctuation of the mind, because in that moment there's just this, oh wow, there's a little bird, hey, and then there's this, I want to document and flag it for what it is for the future or for later, or I've seen this one before, and it's fascinating. Mickey, I have to do this podcast justice, and for those that know you, Brother Bear, you said it yourself, so I'm okay to sort of say it, I hope, but you're 51, bro. And for those that know you, like, it's a really annoying being Mickey's mate and being in your 30s, because he's more mobile and agile than you are. and so in there, it's, first of all, deep gratitude for, I guess, the medicine that you're carrying in many ways, bro, because I have to admit, like, even with lockdown mode being on and stuff here in, where we are in Melbourne, in Australia, Melbourne's had the longest lockdown of all the cities in the world by now. But it's, just there's this real, I think with the Inspired Evolution, what I endeavor to create is something where, I'm inspired and I'm evolving, and my path of, inspires others, hopefully, to walk their own path. Not that I want to be the pinnacle of the spear, but just, I always see myself as the dead weight. And if I can change, everybody else can change, right? But inspiring others and interviewing inspiring people such as yourself to, hopefully share that inspiration elsewhere, so to inspire evolution. Now, there's just, I guess the thing is that leading by example is really remarkable, just kind of frequency that you're carrying. And like I said, being more nimble and more agile than people half your age. And so one of the things I want to tune into there, so that, you know, those that are probably tuning into a podcast with Mickey Space, they probably want to ask this particular question, not all the spiritual stuff that I've just gone and satisfied my own curiosities with. Vitality, bro, like your sort of tidbits for vitality has yoga been, your yoga's of like, without a doubt, probably a cornerstone of all of that and body wisdom. But if we were like in these last 10 odd minutes, like, can you sort of give us some insights in terms of what keeps you so vital? What do you think it is anyway?
Thanks for all those lovely, lovely remarks there, Amrit. I think it's a combination of a few things. I mean, I don't always feel fully vital. Sometimes I wake up going, "Oh, that shoulder," and "Oh, I'm tired." But
Yeah,
yeah, no, no. Overall, I guess I'm doing all right.
sprightly, I
Uh,
would say. But yeah, please continue.
oh, look, I mean, definitely, it's having a good solid practice. So physical and my yoga asana, but also my pranayam and meditation. So pranayam is a big part of my practice, and it's probably as I evolve on my journey, it's become more and more a big part of my practice, and I really feel that pranayam. So pranayam, some people might, if you're not familiar with the yogi lingo, it's, you could say, it's breath work. So working a regular breathwork practice, because breath is everything essentially. Breath is our connection to spirit. It's our connection to life. It's what feeds us our vitality, really, at the deepest level.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have very constricted breaths, and a lot of people smoke, and you know, they really they really challenge their breathing apparatus. And so yeah, having a really good breathwork practice, I feel that helps to charge me up. Breath, the pranayam, charges me, definitely. A good diet, but also that I mean, my diet's, it's not wonderful. I mean, it's reasonable. Probably on average, it's pretty good. I certainly don't eat any fast food, go to McDonald's or anything like that. But yeah, I like my coffee, I like my chocolate, I like to, you know, the occasional indulgence here and there.
Yeah.
And
You're still
you know, and
Italian is
that's,
basically what you're saying.
yeah, I like the pasta, you know, it's, I'm not afraid of wheat.
Yeah.
But you know, and that's I think a big part of it too is the attitude, is the mental attitude, because you know, we can get really anal with our you know, with whatever we're looking into, and that becomes restrictive in itself. So even a spiritual path can be restrictive. And that restriction, you know, when you give yourself restrictions, that's what causes the contractions. The restrictions cause the contractions. So whatever those restrictions are. So having a good healthy attitude to life, and having, you know, trying to cultivate a positive attitude.
Is it about enjoyment?
And yeah, and that's part of it too. And life is a journey. Life is a mystery, and life is an adventure. And we should be embracing the adventure. So we should be diving into the mystery, diving in, embracing the adventure. I've got a pirate hat in my wardrobe, and whenever I can, I wear my pirate hat with pride. I'm definitely a pirate at heart, you know, sailing the seven seas on an adventure without a care in the world. So, you know, if I had to give any advice, embrace your inner pirate, folks. Because life is a mystery, and the ones who solve the mysteries best were the pirates. If you look into
Yo.
their treasure chests.
Intriguing. I love that. An ode to enjoyment, bro, and really finding what lights you up. And I think that, yeah, again, you know, it really speaks volumes, you know, like the energy that you carry, the way you carry yourself and the way you come across, you know, there's always the joyous Mickey. And I know it's not always joyous. Like there's, you know, we've had some deep and meaningful chats, but there's always joy to come home to, you know, which is really Yeah, it's really inspirational. It's really inspirational, bro. And yeah, there's so much on your path. And I feel like even in this podcast, like I've opened up kind of 10 paths to sort of walk down in conversation with you further, but I'm conscious of the time, and I just, those tuning in, that potentially, we sort of potentially put a pin in it for now and then come back to some more of it later. But for those that are, for anything else, I've even got some questions around, just the yoga industry and potentially how it's gone from like 900-hour yoga teacher trainings to 200-hour yoga teacher trainings, and the industry versus the practice. Like there's so much curiosity in there, and what your potential thoughts are, on some of that. But yeah, I think another deep question. So before I let you go though, anything that is super present for you that you wanted to share, with those that are inspired to evolve and on their path and on their journey here today?
Look, I guess right now we're in the real sort of eye of the storm in many ways, with all that's happening in the world. Here in those of us who are here in Melbourne, we're kind of right in the thick of it. I'm not sure when this podcast is going to be coming out, but only yesterday we had an earthquake on the equinox, and in the midst of all these rallies happening in the city, pandemic loose. And it's unsettling times. It challenges the best of us to hold our ground, hold our space in these challenging times. I guess what I'd just like to suggest is that this too shall pass, and this is the first lesson really that you learn on the spiritual path, is that all of this manifest world in all its beauty and all its horror is impermanent. Nothing, not a single speck lasts forever. So this too shall pass. So hold on tight, brothers and sisters. We'll get to sail our pirate ships again soon, and and dive into the mystery.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that wisdom, bro. And just before I let you go, I've got one last little question for myself. Could you, for the audience tuning in, define what is a Shambhala Panini?
Look, this is a personal joke, and I think if anyone comes and visits us personally, we might devolve the mystery of the Shambhala Panini.
The inner secrets remain secret. Okay, fair enough. You've got to cross. That's probably like the yogic path. You've got to cross a certain level of practice before you get to certain levels of wisdom.
That's right.
Oh, bro, thank you so much for being here, doing this with us here today. For those tuning in, especially in lockdown, Mickey's been offering some really awesome yoga offerings online, and with his heart wide open, they're actually based by donation, which is a total trip, because obviously, like I said before, Mickey teaches people how to become a yoga teacher trainer. He's been doing this for 15 plus years. It's been his whole path. And the other cool thing that he does is actually weaves all these mixes in the background to sort of accompany the yoga as well. It's this complete experience. If you ever get the chance, once lockdown ends, to attend one of the Yin Yogas that Mickey offers, it's a journey basically. But bro, I'm going to put some links to your yoga offering in the show notes. Hopefully that's okay. And also to your SoundCloud. By the way, guys, I would like to think, I'm not sure if this is true, but I'd like to think I played a massive part in getting him off Mixcloud. Well, he's on Mixcloud, but also onto SoundCloud. We can actually find Mickey's music on SoundCloud now. And some of the mixes on there are absolutely incredible. I'll link you guys to one of my favorite ones, which is called a Jungle Cuppy mix. You guys can check out all the awesomeness that's coming through Mickey. And I definitely feel like this is an episode one of many. Thank you so much for doing this with us, bro. And on behalf of myself, thank you for today. And on behalf of the audience of the Inspired Evolution, bro, thank you so much. The grace with which you've been able to just free flow and share so much about some really deep spiritual insights is really a blessing to receive.
Oh, the blessing is mine. Thank you so much, Amrit. Thanks for having me, and super grateful to be on the Inspired Evolution.
Love you, bro.
Yo. Yo.
You. hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, leave us a comment. And if you want to stay in tune for new episodes launching every Monday, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay inspired to evolve.